One of my favorite things to talk about, and maybe I don't talk about it enough on this channel, is the Visa Bulletin. The Visa Bulletin is basically the State Department's way of telling us when a visa is available for your case. So in this video, I'll break down the November Visa Bulletin because it is now available, so you know what to look forward to in November. And I'll tell you why the Visa Bulletin matters, how to actually use it, and the one tip that I can give you to make sure that if you're applying for a visa from within the US, that you do not mess up by applying too soon or too late. I am U.S. immigration attorney Lilian Chukwurah, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So let's jump right into the Visa Bulletin because, again, that's what you're here for. That's what we want to talk about. It makes such a huge difference in your whole process. The first thing you need to know about the Visa Bulletin is it only applies to preference categories and non-family-based categories. So for employment, investor visas, you're looking at the Visa Bulletin. For anyone that is not an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, that's a preference family category, you are looking at the Visa Bulletin. So who is an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen? A spouse, a parent, and a child under the age of 21 that is unmarried is an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. If the child is 18 but married, no longer considered an immediate relative. If the child is over the age of 21, no longer considered an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. So it's really important that you know where you are as far as your category is concerned so that you know how this Visa Bulletin can actually apply to you, or if it applies to you at all. So before we look at the Visa Bulletin, I need you to do two things. One, I need you to find your visa category, and two, I need you to find your priority date. If you do not have both of these things, you are not going to get any value out of the Visa Bulletin, right? If you're trying to figure out when can I reasonably expect my case to come up for a visa application, but you don't have your visa category and you don't have your priority date, looking at the Visa Bulletin is not going to be helpful. So if you are just here to learn about the Visa Bulletin, stick around. But if you actually want to check your visa category, your visa to see when you can expect for your turn to reach to apply for your visa, then make sure you have your visa category and your priority dates. Both of those things are going to be in the receipt notice for the I-130. If your I-130 is already approved, then it will be in the receipt notice for the approved I-130, so the approval notice. Now that you have those two things, let's jump right into the November Visa Bulletin. Now, as you can see here, the November Visa Bulletin is already out. We are in October. It is the middle of October, and they already put it out because they already know an estimate of how soon you can actually apply for a visa depending on your visa category. So let's go down here, and we can look at the different categories because, again, that's why I told you the first thing you need to do is find your visa category and your priority date. So first is the visa category. So as you can see here, these are for family-sponsored preferences, which means these individuals are not considered immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, and therefore they are in a preference category. The first is F1, unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens. This means that the child is already over the age of 21, and that child is unmarried. Those two things have to be there for you to be an F1 category. The second category is broken down into two things, F2A and F2B. F2A is the spouses and children of permanent residents. Again, children here means under the age of 21 and unmarried. Children for F2A means under the age of 21 and unmarried. If they are married, they're no longer considered F2A. If they are over the age of, if they're 21 and older, they are no longer considered F2A. So again, spouses and children of permanent residents. And then F2B is the unmarried sons and daughters of permanent residents. Okay. They break these down into two separate categories because, again, children under U.S. immigration law means something specific versus unmarried sons and daughters. Okay. And then the third is F3, which is the married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens. So basically, regardless of age, if you are married and you are the child of a U.S. citizen, you are F3. The fourth is F4, which is the brothers and sisters of adult U.S. citizens. They are very specific by saying adult U.S. citizens because the U.S. citizen sibling must be at least 21 years old in order to file for their brothers and sisters. Okay, so that's why they are very specific about the adult U.S. citizens. And as you can see here, there's no category for married sons and daughters of permanent residents. And that's because permanent residents cannot file for their married children. They can only file for their unmarried children. So this leads me to the first tip in this video. If you are the child of a permanent resident and they have filed an application for you, you are either considered children under F2A or you are unmarried sons and daughters under F2B. And while that application is pending, you go and get married before your parent becomes a U.S. citizen, that application is automatically canceled. Okay, so children of permanent residents can get a green card through their permanent resident parents as long as that child does not go and get married. So I always want to flag this because I have seen this ruin families where they just went and got married thinking there's no big deal, it's not a problem, but they got married before the parent became a U.S. citizen, and that ended up canceling the application. So I want to flag that here, that it is really important to know that married sons and daughters of permanent residents do not get a visa to the U.S. unless that permanent resident eventually becomes a U.S. citizen, and then they can file for their married sons and daughters. Okay. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention here is how many visas are available. One thing people always want to tell me is, why is it taking so long? Why does it take so long to file for your unmarried children? Why does it take so long to file for your married children, your brothers and sisters? Well, here's the thing. Unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, there's 23,400 visas available, right? They are designated with 23,400 visas every single year. Then spouses and children and unmarried sons of daughters of permanent residents. So the second category, 114,200. Yes, the plus, people always want to say plus this, but really that plus never applies. I have not seen the plus apply because none of these are ever exceeded. So this is literally the amount of visas every single year that can be given out for this category. That's why they're called preference categories, because there's limits on the amount of visas available. Okay. And then for married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, 23,400. Not a lot. Not a lot. And that's why there's a huge backlog. And we're going to look at the actual categories and the priority dates so that you can see how big of a backlog these categories actually have. The next, 65,000 for brothers and sisters of adult U.S. citizens. That's it. 65,000. Again, huge backlog in that category as well. When you look at the visa bulletin, you'll see two charts. One is the final action date, and the other is the dates for filing. If you are outside of the U.S., you don't really have to think about this because the National Visa Center and the embassy will take care of this for you. You don't have to really think about it too hard. So when it comes to the filing date, which is where you usually start if you're outside of the US, waiting for a visa, this filing date is typically when the National Visa Center will reach out to you to start putting in your application for a visa, okay? Remember, you need your priority date in order to know where you fit in on the visa bulletin charts, okay? But the filing date will tell you kind of when you should expect the National Visa Center to start sending you the login information for you to start your visa application. Typically, USCIS will pick between the date for filing and the final action date to determine when you can file your green card application, your I-485, if you are physically in the US and you have current status, or you qualify for a 245I. So if you are physically in the US waiting for your visa to become available based on the visa bulletin, and you are in a current status, let's say you are H-1B, F-1, any other valid status, you need to pay attention to the visa bulletin, but also which chart USCIS is using to determine when you would qualify to file for your I-485. Really important here. But regardless of if they're using the filing date or if they're using the final action date, they cannot make a decision on your case. Even if you file it based on the filing, the date for filing, they cannot make a decision on your case until your priority date is within the final action date. Okay, super important here. All right, so now let's get into this. Why does your priority date matter? So if you're F1, you need to be looking at this date, right? To determine how far away are you from someone that filed, right? Depending on your priority date. If you are planning on filing today, you can look at this and see that F1 categories, they are putting those in 2016, okay? F1 categories, everyone other than Mexico and the Philippines is in 2016, November 8, 2016. That means for you to actually be approved a visa, your priority date needs to be before this date, okay? For you to actually be approved for a visa, your priority date needs to be before the final action date. So if you're filing today, I say subtract and see how long it took someone that filed in 2016 to get their visa, okay? F2A, remember that's the spouses and children of permanent residents. So F2A is actually better, right? The final action date is 2024, so they are a year off. However, F2A filing date is October 22, 2025. We haven't reached October 22, 2025 yet as I'm recording this video. This video is probably going to come out after that date, but I just want to flag that for you because that is basically saying that this is current, almost current, for the filing date. Okay, remember, filing date is different from final action date. Please don't mistake the two. So, and also pay attention to your country of origin. There's only 4 countries that are that have country limits. Okay, only 4 countries have country limits. That's mainland, China, India, Mexico, and Philippines. You need to be a citizen or born in one of these countries to fit into that category. Okay, if you live in that country but you're born somewhere else or you're a citizen of a different country, this country limit does not apply to you, okay? So just pay attention to that. If you are from Mexico, but you live in Panama, this limit still applies to you. Does that make sense? So you want to pay attention to your priority date, first your category, because that's going to then tell you which priority date is going to apply to you. And then from there, you can then decide, is my priority date up, but National Visa Center hasn't sent me anything? What do I do? You reach out to them and remind them that your priority date is up and you can now file your visa. Okay? If you are physically in the US, you are in valid status, or you qualify for 245I, you can apply for an I-485, the green card application, right here in the US without leaving if your priority date fits the Visa Bulletin. Now, USCIS has their own information of which chart they're going to use depending on the month. Okay, depending on the month, they may use the final action date, but usually they use the filing, right? USCIS typically use the dates for filing, but you always double check before you file, okay? Always double check, because that may be the month that they use the final action date instead of the filing date. Also, because I have seen this mistake, make sure that when you are looking at the Visa Bulletin, you know what month you are looking at. It's important to note the date that the Visa Bulletin is for, because that's going to tell you when you can actually file your application. So let's say this is for November 2025. That means if your priority date is, let's say, December 5th, 2016, that means you can't file yet. But what if it's November 30th, 2016? That means in November of 2025, you can file your visa application. Okay, so you need to pay attention to that. Here's one tip that I want you to remember. If you are physically in the US, you have an I-130 approved, you're waiting for your priority date to become current, meaning it says here that you can actually file your visa application or your green card application. Once your priority date becomes current, that's when you can actually apply for the I-485 in the US. Remember, you need to have legal status or qualify for a 245I. But if you have either of those things, you can apply for the 485 in the US. But here is the part that I want you to remember. This date applies to people applying in November of 2025. So even though it says October 22, 2025, that does not mean you can go and start applying for your visa in October of 2025. You still have to wait for this priority date to become current, and that becomes current in November of 2025. Okay, do not send your application too early. So let's say your priority date, let me give you a quick example of what this actually means. For the date for filing on the chart for October's Visa Bulletin, it has F2A as September 22, 2025, right? That was the priority date. That if your priority date was before that, you can file your I-485 application in the US. However, remember September 22. On the November Visa Bulletin, it has the F2A as October 22, 2025, which means that anyone that has a priority date before this can file in November. In November, not October, not September. We're already past September, but not October, okay? So once your priority date reaches, because a lot of people, there was a jump from September 22 to October 22, okay? So that's a whole month that now people can apply for an I-485 in the US. So make sure you're waiting till November to file. Do not send your application early, because even if it's 1 day early, USCIS will reject or deny your application. So make sure you are sending your application in the month that your case is current, that your priority date is current, okay? So if you were, let's say your priority date was October 1st, 2025, and you want to send in your I-485, I need you to wait till November 1st, 2025 to send it in. Do not send it in on October 26th, just so we will get there on time. Because guess what? It may get there on October 30th or October 31st. And guess what's going to happen if USCIS receives it on October 31st instead of November 1st? They will deny it. They will reject it. You will need to do it all over again. And sometimes they don't get to that fact that they accepted it too early for like a year. So you want to make sure that you are keeping track of when the visa bulletin actually applies. So for people between September 22, 2025 for F2A and October 22, 2025, you're going to be excited to start your process, but I'm gonna need you to wait till November 1st to start that process, okay? You want to avoid any sort of delay, and you want to pay attention to why the visa bulletin is the way it is, okay? Now, if every single month, I, as an attorney, I've been doing this for 10 years, every single month I check the visa bulletin, you don't have to check it every single month unless you know that you are very close to your priority date being current. So if you're filing in 2025 and the priority date is still in like 2017 for your category, you may want to just lay off the checking the visa bulletin. But if, let's say, your priority date is 2018 and they are currently in 2017, you may want to check it every single month just to see where they are and how fast it's moving month to month, okay? So that you don't end up like missing something. So that is the visa bulletin in a nutshell. I hope it makes sense to you. I hope if you have questions, you put them in the comments. If you are wondering, what is my category? Where do I fit in? Put your questions in the comments, okay? Let's help each other. Ask me questions, because when it comes to the visa bulletin, the worst thing you can do is file your application too early, but being aware of how close you are to your priority date being current is actually helpful, because then you can start putting together your documents that you're going to need for your affidavit of support and all of those things, especially if you're in a situation where your petitioner may have retired and now you're going to need a joint sponsor. You can pay attention to all of that and be able to plan ahead, because you know you're very close to your priority date. If you are looking to file for a family member and they may be in a preference category, but you're not really sure what to do, how to process their application, please feel free to reach out to me. I can help you figure out the process, talk about what steps need to take place, and how we may be able to help you make that happen. If you would like to schedule a free 15-minute strategy session with me, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com. Click on Contact Us, and you can select a date and time that works best for you for us to chat about your situation.